Good morning. Today we're going to be looking at a computer program that's going to help us visualize and better understanding the multiplication of integers. So I'm going to read through this first slide and then we'll go from there. Mission number 1. On the next two screens we will explore the multiplication of positive integers. Number 1, we're going to create the size of the group, and that'll be in parentheses. And then we're going to drag this point to create multiplication of our group. For example, 2 times 3 means 2 groups of 3. So the size of the group is 3. And we looked at a lot of this with Mr. Hawley yesterday. We're just going to reinforce it a little bit more today with this lesson. So I'm going to move to the next screen. Okay, so create the size of the group, and I'm doing 3 groups of 8. So my group size is 8. So group size is 8, and then I'm going to drag this block to make 3 groups. So 1 group, 2 group, 3 groups. Now I have 3 groups of 8, and notice that is 24. We're going to move on to the next slide. This is a checkpoint for you to do. Describe both the size of the group and the amount of groups in the image. Then write the multiplication expression. So, looking here, maybe I need to look back and make sure I know what I'm talking about. So here I had 3 groups, and each group had 8. So here it looks like I have 3 groups, and inside of each group, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think I have 3 groups of 5, which would be 3 times 5. Now we're going to look at the next part of this. On the next 2 screens, we will explore the multiplication of negative integers. We're going to create the size of our group, and that's what's in parentheses. Each group here is -3. And then we're going to drag the black point to create the multiplication, or the repeatedly adding of the group. So here's our example. 2 times -3 means 2 groups. 1 group, 2 groups of -3. The size of the group is -3. Okay, so here's our task. 4 groups of -7. So our group size is -7. Okay, -7. I'm looking at it here. Okay, -7. Let me move this up. -7 is our group size, and then we need 4 groups of that. So here's 1 group, 2nd group, 3rd group, 4th group. So 4 groups of -7 gives me -28. This relates back to the number lines and the ideas in Mr. Hawley's video as well, that we are repeatedly subtracting this 7. So -7, -7, -7, -7. 4 times we are removing 7. Describe both the size of the group and the amount of groups in this image. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups, and in each group there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 left movements. So 5 groups of -6. Or there's 5 groups, there's -6 or 6 negatives in each group. So that would be 5 groups of -6, which gives us -30. Sort the cards into equivalent values to make 3 groups. So this is one of those things that hopefully you've already done, because you were supposed to do this by yourself first and then check the video as needed. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to go ahead and organize them, and you should have already done this. So here's what you should have ended up with when you sorted those cards. You can pause this and check yourself. Notice 3 groups, 1, 2, 3 of -4 is -12. 3 groups of -8 in each group, so 3 left movements gives you -24. 5 groups of 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups with 4 in each group gives you 20. So up until now, we've been either doing positive times positive, which is old news, or we've done a positive times a negative. So we've had so many groups of a negative number. Now we're going to move into looking at other situations, which I believe Mr. Hawley said it could be challenging or mind-bending. So we are going to look at those together and hopefully continue to make sense of that. So to help us make sense of this, we're going to use what's called an opposite switch. And the opposite switch is basically like if we were multiplying by -1. So we're just going to try it here. Here's the original. But what if we were multiplying by -1? So notice the original here is 9, but the opposite of that would be -9. So look at the expression here. We've got 9. And then what if we multiplied by -1? We would have -9. So here's 9, and we've done opposites before. We understand that the opposite of 9 is -9. We understand that opposites are on the opposite side of 0 on the number line, and they have the same absolute value. So let's move on. So here we have 2 groups of 6. 2 groups, in each group there's 6. So the question is, how is the opposite of 2 groups of 6 written? So the opposite of 2, and the groups are still 6. So let's see what it looks like. The opposite of 2, this is what I think, the opposite of 2 groups of 6. Let's see. Opposite of 2 groups of 6. So let's look at that. There's the original. Okay. But the opposite of it, or when I multiply by -1, the original product was 12. The opposite product is -12. All right. I like this opposite switch. It's a very good visual. So the 2 groups of 6, but the opposite of 2 groups of 6 is -12. 2 groups of 6 is 12. The opposite of 2 groups of 6 is -12. Okay. The opposite of 3 groups of 6. So let's start by doing the group size is 6. So group size is 6. And then we're going to drag the dot to make 3 groups of 6. Move me. 1, 2, 3 groups. Okay. And then turn the opposite switch on. So right now we just have 3 groups of 6, but we need the opposite of 3 groups of 6. So we have 3 times 6. We need -3 times 6. So here we go. What do you think it's going to be? Ooh, the opposite of 3 groups of 6 is -18. So we have 3 groups of 6. or 3 times 6 is 18, but negative 3 times 6 is negative 18. So let's think about what changed and what didn't. When we just had 3 times 6, it was 18, so the absolute value is 18. But it's positive 18 because 3 groups of 6 is 3 movements of 6 to the right. Okay, when we did the opposite of that, we had still 3 groups of 6. The absolute value or the length did not change. What did change was the direction. So this time we were doing the opposite of 3 groups of 6. So we went left instead of the original, which was right. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to do, here we have 2 groups of negative 5. Turn on the opposite switch to change 2 groups of negative 5 to its opposite. Oh my goodness. The opposite of 2 groups of negative 5. Okay, I think that's what it's going to look like. Let's try it out. The opposite of 2 groups, here's 2 groups of negative 5. Opposite of that? Oh, so 2 groups of negative 5 is 2 movements to the left, 5 each. But the opposite of that would be 2 movements to the right, 5 each. So, let's look at that again. We've got 2 movements to the left, or 2 groups of negative 5, which gives us negative 10. But the opposite, so let's think, the opposite of negative 10 is 10, so the opposite of this should be 10. Let's see if it is. It is. Okay. Alright, this time we have the opposite of 3 groups of negative 7. So our group size is negative 7. And there's 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, but we need the opposite of that. Okay, so now if 3 groups of negative 7 is negative 21, the opposite of that should be 21. And it is. Okay. So we have another sorting activity. I'm going to pause mine. You should have already done this. And here are the results you should have gotten. So double check yourself there. You can pause it to check yourself. And you're going to complete this. Just pause it, complete it, and then unpause it to check yourself. So you can pause and check this. This bottom one, actually there are multiple correct answers here. You should have 1 positive and 1 negative, and a 3 and a 5, or a 1 and a 15. So if you have a question about whether you did this one correctly, you can email your teacher, but there we go. So now we have some practice for you to do. Thank you for participating.